The van didn't just appear to be abandoned, it looked like it had been hidden. It was bogged deep in bushland, 35 kilometers from the nearest track. Its recovery boards had been deployed but left behind. Inside, everything was strangely intact. Food, water, clothes. There were no signs of a struggle, but also no sign of Karolina. There were no footprints, no phone, no notes left behind. She was simply gone. 26 years old, a solo backpacker with a solid plan, her van fitted for survival. She'd made contact with her friends less than 48 hours earlier, so why would she walk into the outback alone without shoes? Why leave her only protection behind? Unless that is, something or someone made her run. Because this part of Western Australia is remote, and out here, if someone did want to make a person disappear, they could. By the way, this is Dark Case, and you can call me Jack. I bring you rare and unseen true crime cases, as well as other things that you may later regret knowing, with multiple uploads every single week. So if this sounds like your kind of thing, make sure you join the Dark Case family now by hitting subscribe and turning on all notifications. And if you are already a subscriber, just double check those notifications, because only around 13% of you have them actually turned on. And now for today's silly little question. What's the furthest you've ever walked, jogged or ran in one go? Let me know down in the comments. All of your support over on Patreon, as well as right here via channel memberships on YouTube, are so appreciated, and I really can't thank you all enough. However, of course, thank you. But now, on with the video. Karolina Wilga had been in Australia for 2 years. The 26-year-old had worked mine site jobs in remote Western Australia, and she'd spent time in Fremantle. And whilst there, she lived for a while at the Sundance Backpackers Hostel. Like many solo travellers, she craved freedom and adventure. So in June, she bought a black and silver Mitsubishi Delica van. She packed it with supplies, and she told her friends that she was heading northeast, out towards the remote Wheatbelt region. Her plan was to explore some of the state's hidden bushland, and then eventually head to the east coast. On June the 28th, Karolina left Fremantle alone. A friend then received a 7 AM message from her that morning, saying that she couldn't drop off a book and jerry can as planned. Later that afternoon at 4:28 PM, she was last seen on CCTV, filling her van with fuel at a gas station in Tudia. She paid inside and then left at 4:41 PM, and she drove off into the Wheatbelt. That night, she messaged another friend with a short voice recording. She said, "I just couldn't wait anymore. Ugh, I felt tired." By noon the next day, on June the 29th, she appeared once again. She was captured on CCTV at a small general store in Beacon. This is 300 kilometers northeast of Perth, where Karolina browsed quietly, dressed in ripped blue jeans, a cream-coloured long-sleeved top, and a matching scarf. She seemed tired, probably weary from the road, but she was also calm. Police believe that after leaving that shop, she continued east, possibly towards Waiauki, another small outpost on the edge of the Karun Hill Nature Reserve. That was their last confirmed sighting. From June the 30th onwards, Karolina's phone went silent. There was no longer any social media activity. There were no messages and no more updates. Her family in Germany, used to hearing from her regularly, began to panic. By July the 7th, more than a week after she vanished, the family reported her missing through Interpol. That same day, the Western Australia Police launched a major search.
Investigators are using planes and helicopters as they scour the remote areas of the Wheatbelt, with local officers checking campgrounds and trails. But police say that Karolina's disappearance is concerning and unusual, and they're not ruling out anything as the search expands nationally.
Western Australia's Wheatbelt is beautiful, but it is unforgiving. A place of vast skies, red dirt and dense wattle scrub. With just 123 people living in Beacon, and even fewer scattered across the nearby bush, a lone traveller could easily vanish without anyone noticing. Karolina's friends and family, though, didn't stay silent. They wanted her found. Her mother, Katja, still in Germany, took to social media with a desperate plea. Karolina is still sorely missed. Please keep your eyes open.
Karolina is described as of German origin, of slim build with brown curly hair, brown eyes and several tattoos, including a distinctive symbols tattoo on her left forearm. Karolina has been backpacking within Australia for the last 2 years and more recently working in regional WA on mine sites and primarily living in backpackers and hostels on a return to Perth. WA Police urge anyone who has seen Karolina, has any footage or any information that may assist us in regard to her location, to come forward. Contact police immediately on 131444.
Backpackers who had last seen her in Fremantle also began sharing her photo, just hoping that someone might recognise the distinctive van, a black and silver Delica with a rooftop tent and recovery board strapped to the back. I really love vans and campers, by the way. I know you don't know that about me, but Delicas are just awesome, like the coolest van you can get. Western Australia Police Major Crime Division took over the investigation. Karolina's complete disappearance was deeply concerning. She hadn't used her phone, nor had she accessed her bank account. In fact, she hadn't contacted a single person, and the longer that silence dragged on, the more ominous it all felt. On July the 10th, 12 days after her last known sighting, investigators caught their first real break. A pilot from the police air wing spotted a dark vehicle deep in the bushland of the Karun Hill Nature Reserve. In fact, it was more than 50 kilometres from the nearest track. Officers on foot approached cautiously. There was no sign of struggle. There was no red spatter, and there were no personal belongings scattered outside to make it look like anything had happened at all. However, the van was clearly stuck. It was wedged into soft earth, with the yellow recovery track still placed under the rear tyres in a failed attempt to get it moving once again. Inside, investigators found survival gear, solar panels, clothing, some food, and several litres of water. These are all things that could have kept a stranded traveller alive for weeks. So why had Karolina left it? A forensic team arrived to comb through every item inside. Investigators hoped to determine what she might have taken with her. A backpack, shoes, water bottle, compass, anything useful. The problem was the vehicle was located at least 35 kilometres from the nearest marked path. If Karolina had just walked away, that meant she would have entered the harshest landscapes in Western Australia. They are dense with rocky outcrops. There's no signage and no reliable landmarks. Temperatures were dropping below freezing overnight. And to make things worse, there had been rain. Rescuers feared that if she was out there alone, she would have succumbed to the elements, or simply become too lost to ever be found. However, they pressed on. They launched a full-scale ground and air search, fanning out across the Karun Hill Reserve. Helicopters scoured the terrain. Volunteers walked grid patterns through the thick scrub. Police across the state were brought in, and their working theory was simple. She'd left her vehicle, which meant that she couldn't have gotten too far. The only question was whether they could find her in time, or if she'd suffered a terrible fate at the hands of someone else.
I would say in the last few days, each time I've gone into the shop or I've been at the club, you hear talk of, have you heard any updates and stuff, and hearing real concern from our local members. And, pretty much we're just hoping for the best, that this girl is found safe. And so last night at the country club, we had the news going and everyone's eyes were glued to it, wanting to, just really hoping that there was a good update. Unfortunately not, but here's to the next few days, hopefully soon.
By the time Karolina's van was discovered, she'd already been missing for 11 long days. Every survival expert knew that the clock was nearly out. In fact, her time was probably already up. Western Australia Police launched an expanded land and air search, but it based these on the fact that Karolina could still be alive, or they could just be looking for a body. Her last known location where the van was found was a place where even seasoned bushwalkers would carry locator beacons and survival gear. Police began mapping likely footpaths from the site. They were now using drones with heat imaging. They used satellite coordinates and weather data, but the terrain was fighting back. Much of the area was just dense scrub, where visibility dropped to basically zero. The ground was uneven, the plant life was thorny, and in the colder zones, searchers had to battle freezing wind, mud, and temperatures close to zero in the later hours. Basically, out there, everything is competing to be the first thing to kill you. But still, they didn't stop. Officers used Karolina's likely pace, direction of travel, and terrain modelling to calculate where she might have gone, if and only if she were walking west. This is because some broken twigs near the vehicle suggested she may have headed in that direction. Helicopters buzzed overhead throughout the day. Police on dirt bikes and foot combed the surrounding kilometres, but nobody found a thing. Every hour that passed increased the odds of a tragic outcome. Detectives from the homicide division were brought in to assist. Karolina's name was circulated through national and international missing persons databases. The Western Australia Premier Roger Cook issued a public statement saying that his heart went out to Karolina's loved ones, adding that this case was remarkable and deeply troubling.
Sure. Yeah, right. But you're going to go right in the middle, eh? The police are throwing a lot of resources at this particular task. It often takes a while for a missing person to be reported to police, and obviously they can only act on the basis of those reports. They've moved swiftly now, and the search is ongoing and is resource intensive. We want to bring Karolina home, and the police are doing everything they can.
Search teams prepared to scale back their efforts by sunset on July the 11th, but before they could leave, a single call came through from a dirt road 24 kilometres west of the van. Tanya Henley had no plans to be out that way. The weather had turned again. It was cold and windy. The road was gravel, narrow and nearly always empty, but as she drove along Maroubra Road, something unusual caught her eye. A thin figure, barefoot, waving both arms. Tanya slowed to a crawl. She already knew what she was seeing. "There's nobody who comes up my way walking around," she later said. And that slow, struggling figure waving their arms was indeed Karolina. She was starving, mosquito-bitten, and wearing the same cream-coloured top and scarf seen in the last CCTV footage from Beacon. One foot was now wrapped in fabric. She was pale, skeletal, but still standing. Tanya stopped the car and gave her an apple. Then she called the police.
She did an amazing job to survive. Like, she told me, like, she was in a cave for a couple of days, you know, so she was resilient. I mean, you'd have to have a lot of determination to survive. 12 days is pretty incredible, really.
Yeah, can you just run me through like that starting? Were you out trying to look for her?
I went out to actually send a picture to the police. Not the day that I found her, the day before. So I'd been out in the reserve because that's the only way I can do that. I've got Wi-Fi calling. That doesn't show. You can't send pictures through Messenger. Message. You know. So I went out there and I thought, no, I'll just keep looking. And I went probably 3/4 of the way down the reserve, down to the grid, and then I turned around and came back. But I checked just tracks and things like that, because you can tell tracks last a long time in here. But it had rained, see, and that would have made it hard for anybody to find her anyway. And so I kept. Wow.
What made you want to start looking? You know, did you think you just had a hunch that she could be out there close by to you, or?
My friends kept saying, "You'll find her," and I go, "No, I don't think so." You know, it would be nice, but yeah, because you know, the odds of finding anybody after 12 days are really remote. Like alive, and she was well, thin but well. fragile, yes. Because, I mean, yeah. And the midges are bad this time of year, and, yeah, they had bitten her. But, you know, other than, she was remarkably well, you know, for a person that had been out in the bush for 12 days, yeah. She didn't know what day it was. And I suppose you would lose track of how many days. But it was just incredible because she trekked overland, no shoes on, and I'm thinking it must be about 50 k's.
It seems
I think, if not more.
Yeah, it seems impossible to even believe. Were you just in a state of shock yourself? I mean...
Oh, I was a bit, but I thought it probably was meant to be. Like, you know, she was so lucky. I did say that, you know, she just, yeah, she wasn't meant to go this time.
No.
Remember that. Tell your grandkids that, you know. Yeah.
Karolina doesn't remember the exact moment that she realised she was lost. After crashing her van on uneven terrain, she hit her head, and she hit it hard. The next day, confused and disorientated, she panicked. Despite having food, water, and shelter in the van, she instead left. In her own words, as a result of the accident, I left my car in a state of confusion and got lost. She had no map. She had no compass. She had no functioning phone. She tried to orient herself by the sun heading west. She just lived in hope of finding a road or a house, or just one single other human being. Instead, she found 11 nights of freezing temperatures, of brutal mosquitoes, of thorny brush, and total isolation. At one point, she took shelter inside a small cave. She stayed alive by drinking water from puddles as well as rain. She ate what little food she'd grabbed before leaving the van, and she rationed her energy by moving only during the warmer parts of the day. Since she left without any shoes, she wrapped a scarf around her injured foot. She used her clothing to try and layer up against the nighttime cold, but she had no way of starting a fire and no blankets. The terrain scraped her skin raw. Her legs and arms were covered in welts from mosquito bites. In the darkness of the bush, Karolina was convinced that she wouldn't survive. She got to a point where she thought no one was coming. The words of Western Australia Police Acting Detective Inspector Jessica Sakuro. She continued, she is still in disbelief that she was able to survive.
Paint a picture, if you can, of the moment you had with her. What was her condition like? She was clearly, obviously, going to be very overwhelmed.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. She was very distressed, obviously exhausted, dehydrated, needed some food, but overall just relieved that she has come across someone and able to get that help. As we know in Western Australia, our outback area can be made of many terrains, which can be quite challenging. So often if you are out there, you may think, oh, I'm never going to come across someone who may help me. So, you know, we're very grateful that we found her.
Yeah, and I think over the years we've heard...
But what kept her moving, putting one foot in front of the other? It was the idea that someone might still be looking for her. And indeed, they were. In her official statement later, Karolina said, "The thought of all the people who believed in me, searched for me, and kept hoping for me, gave me the strength to carry on during my darkest moments." And amazingly, Karolina Wilga's story is far from over. Within hours of being found, she was on a Western Australia police transport plane, headed for Perth. She walked up the steps of the aircraft with a visible limp, but amazingly, she did it on her own. Inside the Fiona Stanley Hospital, she was rehydrated, fed, and given medical treatments. And for the first time in 12 days, she was able to sleep in a bed. It's hard to imagine just how incredible that must have felt. Police confirmed that she'd survived 11 nights in the outback. She had only minor injuries along with severe hydration and, of course, emotional trauma. But she was alive and she will survive. This is the best result we could have hoped for, said Acting Detective Inspector Jessica Sakuro. And everybody involved, from the police to the Premier to the farmer who stopped, called this what it was: a miracle, an incredible story of survival. Karolina Wilga says she still plans to see Australia's east coast, but she'll never forget what Western Australia has taught her. Previously, I didn't know where my place was, in a culture on the other side of the world, she said. But now, I feel a part of it. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.